So let's begin with a huge international story. British socialite and Jeffrey Epstein confidant Ghislaine Maxwell is appearing in court on Friday on charges that she recruited girls for sexual abuse. So Maxwell has so far denied these allegations, but there are reports that she might name names, that she might name high profile Epstein associates and turn over sex tapes to save herself. What do we think of this, and what do we think of the focus on her famous friends? Marianne, what do you think?
I mean, like, it's a horrifying, fascinating story. And the name of the list that has the most impact on me is actually Bill Clinton, because it's obvious looking back that, of course, he was a womanizer and a predator. But for whatever reason, it was probably because I was younger and I was more clueless, and because he was charismatic and handsome, and also because he did an awful lot here in Ireland to facilitate the peace process in Northern Ireland. But I was always a bit kind of, oh, Bill, you and those two, and I for the ladies, you're such a bold boy. And now, I'm completely, recalibrating my relationship to that and thinking, no, like, that was appalling. He should never have been given that sort of leeway. And then I suppose, obviously, in this part of the world, I'm Irish, but the next country is Britain, Prince Andrew. And I presume that there's a lot of worry that, he is going to be asked to come to the US and to testify. And there's a lot of conjecture going on in the UK at the moment. Like, some people are saying that, like, he'll never be sent because the UK want to protect their relationship with the US, and other people are saying that, like, she has already said she's not going to sell him out. But, like, it's seismic. Like, it's a massive, massive story.
It's massive because of some of the names that you've mentioned. And just for the record, even though Bill Clinton, we know, is an associate or a friend of Epstein, he hasn't actually been charged with anything. However, moving on from that name and a Prince Andrew and so many other people who sort of orbited or were friends with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, that's where this story gets me. Because why the intrigue? You have some of the world's most powerful and rich and influential people that Jeffrey Epstein, just by the nature of his job, was friends with. And so now you have potentially this, they call her a madam, and certainly the dozens of victims who have come forward against Epstein have almost all named her as an alleged accomplice in all of this. But it's a time of reckoning. This has all the elements of what today is all about, which is a reckoning and an accountability for the most powerful people in the world. Whether you're a police officer who's accused of behaving badly, or the president of the United States, or Jeffrey Epstein, the question is, who is going to hold your feet to the fire and make you accountable? Because nobody is above the law. And I think if you have a woman like Ghislaine, who potentially is going to out some of the world's most famous people, potentially dozens, that is, to me, what this is all about. It's about protecting the most vulnerable, finally getting justice for the most vulnerable, and bringing down people who have operated their entire lives with the protection of power, money, and privilege.
You just said it, Mel. No one is above the law. In this story, there is some stink for everyone, regardless of your political affiliations. Maybe because the abuse of extreme power knows no political boundaries. And it's interesting how different political sides are using this story to politicize it, in a sense. Donald Trump, for instance, Donald Trump Jr., found a photo of Ghislaine at Chelsea Clinton's wedding and tweeted out the photo and said, "Birds of a feather." And then, of course, people on the other side tweeted photos of him, of Ghislaine, with his father and his stepmother. So it's both sides are trying to use just any sort of affiliation as this gotcha moment. And I think it's far more complicated than that. This is going to be a massive, massive story, as it should be.
You know, I'll admit I haven't really been following this story closely just because it's so stomach churning. I will say that it does seem obviously like she was very complicit in the same way that it was hard to believe that Harvey Weinstein's assistants didn't have some knowledge about what was going on behind the scenes. But then again, I mean, I feel like a lot of people, because they've been photographed with Epstein or with Ghislaine, have been sort of, you know, had this eye cast on them. And I'm not so sure we can easily and should easily just sort of be like, okay, well, then they're all complicit. We don't know that for a fact. And it's a slippery slope just to be like, oh, well, you were photographed with this person, thereby you must have known, thereby you must be guilty to some degree. Like, for example, Naomi Campbell is one of those people. I think Epstein and Ghislaine were at one of her birthday parties. They were photographed together. Does that mean that Naomi knew? Does that mean, you know, she was in any way complicit? Probably not. I will say there are a lot of photos, as you've mentioned, with Donald Trump and with Melania Trump and that whole crew. Clearly, they rolled tight. So I can't help but have a tiny piece of hope that if there is some dirt, on Donald Trump connected to Epstein, that it does come out and comes out soon with video evidence.
Yeah, there's so much that we don't know. But what we do know is that Ghislaine is very much at the center of this story. The network that she inherited from her late billionaire father, the publishing tycoon, Robert Maxwell, really opened up the corridors of wealth and power to Jeffrey Epstein. She was the one that introduced Jeffrey Epstein to Prince Andrew and to others. So I think, you know, why wasn't she arrested earlier? This is the question that I'm asking. And my mind goes to another high profile case, a Canadian case, that being Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka. They made a deal. The police made a deal that they later called a deal with the devil with Karla Homolka to talk about everything that she knew regarding her husband, Paul Bernardo. And it was almost as if, you know, the police, society as a whole, couldn't fathom a woman being evil, a woman being at the center of something, at the center of luring young women, of being responsible for their murders. It just wasn't fathomable. And so they made a deal with this woman, and she did her time and is now, you know, living her life. It's just really, really interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how this works with regards to Ghislaine Maxwell and what happens in court.
And speaking of court, Marcy, she is going to be in court this Friday. And obviously, as we've all alluded to, a massive story. I'm sure we'll continue to follow it indeed.